Look at the screen. Look at the screen because you have to see it to believe it. Demon Slayer surpasses 100 million sales in 2020. Say it with me.
Damn!
Kimetsu no Yaiba, or Demon Slayer, is a hyper-popular manga about Tanjiro Kamado, a boy who becomes a demon slayer after his family is killed and his sister is turned into a demon. Both the manga and the anime have dominated charts since it debuted, but 2020 has been particularly good to the series, despite it ending in May. The movie that just came out earned $287 million in the box office and will probably top Spirited Away in Japan before the end of the year. Ironically, because this is Koyoharu Gotoge's first series, she probably didn't make that much money off the film or with the licensing. But with the news about the recent release of Volume 23, that may change. According to Oricon, which tracks manga sales, quote, Kimetsu no Yaiba Volume 23 has sold around 2,855,000 copies in its first week, becoming the largest first week ever for a volume in Oricon's history. I will repeat that so it sinks in. Demon Slayer has sold 2,885,000 copies in its first week. And then the follow-up special edition sold another 570,000 copies for a total of 3,431,000 copies for one volume.
Goddamn!
It's just insane that this series is banking that much money, which shows just how popular it's become. People love the series, both the anime and the manga, and it's dwarfing the competition. Look at this chart of sales from 2020. Demon Slayer tops the chart with 82 million copies sold. Kingdom comes up second place with 8 million copies, 10 times less than Demon Slayer. It's bodied One Piece, which got 7.7 million. The Promised Neverland, which also ended this year, got 6.3 million. My Hero Academia got 6 million, and Attack on Titan sits at 4.3 million. These are all very popular series, but if you added up all the series on this chart, they still collectively fall short of Demon Slayer with just 57.2 million copies combined. To put this in perspective, Demon Slayer has been running for 4 years and is about to overtake Bleach in overall sales, a series that ran for 15 years. It sold more copies in 2020 than many of the most popular mangas had ever sold 4 years into their run. This is an absurd number of books, and I hope that Kotoge renegotiates her contract so she can bank off the success of the series, even though it just ended. It's a shame for it to make so much money, but she gets a tiny piece of it because this was her first series. But now let's talk about the elephant in the room, namely that every one of these series crushes the yearly sales of most of the top 10 American comics combined. Demon Slayer alone is just 1.3 million copies away from the 2019 yearly total of all comics sold through Diamond, which was 83.6 million copies. Now, normally manga doesn't sell at this high a number, but they still push more copies than American comics do, quite often in Japan alone. So keep that in mind. The numbers from the Oricon chart may not include international sales. What makes this so damning is that superheroes haven't been this popular in decades, before most of the people listening to this, their parents, possibly even their grandparents, were born. The highest grossing film ever is a comic book movie. Marvel and DC have made billions putting these characters into theaters, TV shows, and games, but they can barely get 100,000 sales for their top 10 comics if they're lucky. Why is that? What's so different about Japan that they will buy comics and then flock to theaters to watch movies about those comics, but you couldn't give away comics to MCU fans? I think it can be summed up with one word: excitement. All of these manga are interesting to their fan base and to non-fans. You see clips of the anime, and you want to watch the show. You know the show is probably based on a manga, so you want to read the manga, knowing that it could be very close or very different from the show. Either way, it's still enjoyable because it's got the same great story that drew you in, most of the time. And if the mangaka is a particularly good artist, that alone may keep you there. This transition never happens with American comics. Few people who watch the movies or play the games rush to get the comics they're based on. It's basically one direction. Readers go to see the movies, movie fans don't go to get the books. And of course, if some of them did, they would find, virtually without exception, that none of the books are like the films. A handful of characters have had their personalities changed to match the movie versions, but for the most part, these are completely different characters with decades of backstory and current storylines that often bank on that history, making the book near impenetrable for new readers. The art is hit or miss, with some of it being there to catch your eye while the rest is just a placeholder for the writer's prose. The cool and wow factor is basically gone. There are some artists who are hell-bent on making something that pops off the page, but for the most part, A lot of the comics have become glorified illustrations instead of dynamic, interesting storytelling images, and the books are written that way as well. They're written for the trade, but without any sense of creating a cliffhanger to make readers want to come back for more. The books are often written only for comic book fans, which is a niche group of people, and sometimes only for other creators, so that the books are uninteresting to anyone not in the know. They've become literary jazz, something really complex and artistic, but no one cares because no one understands what the hell you're doing. The American comic book industry has become one massive circle jerk where most of the books coming from the top publishers are written for a niche market, the complaint that Karen's running things behind the scenes, and a non-existent woke fan base that never buys comics. The thought of creating something like Demon Slayer, Kingdom, One Piece, or Attack on Titan never crosses their minds. Hell, the idea of creating something like My Hero Academia never crosses their minds, though God help us when it does because they will thoroughly fuck that up. Fans have lost faith in the comic book industry because the industry no longer makes or wants to make books that pull people in. A handful of individuals might want to do this, but as a group, as an industry, the focus is not on what's good for business or what appeals to fans, but what will get them the most backpats in the industry, the most likes on Facebook and Twitter, and what will piss off Richard Call Me By Your Name Meyer. The result is that manga completely bodies the American comic book industry in the number of books sold, the quality of storytelling and art, and in popularity. Marvel has spent 10 years trying to make Mala Khan and Miles Morales popular, failing every time. Meanwhile, Haikyuu, a manga about volleyball, is more popular and actually beloved. I mean, damn. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.